Hello friends, my name is Michelle. Welcome to this recommendations video. Hello also to various readers that are not friends yet, but they're gonna click subscribe and they're gonna become my friends. Hello to gamers and hello to TV enthusiasts. What's up? How are you doing? Today we are here kind of in celebration of The Last of Us because it hit HBO a few weeks ago now. I have not recovered. I know that the internet in general has not recovered, and I was thinking to myself, how can I incorporate The Last of Us into my channel as somebody who has played the game up to 20 times and who is completely not okay over the adaptation because it's just so good. And I was like, okay, as a booktube channel, I can do book recommendations, but I don't want to give you recommendations that are exactly like The Last of Us. Like, for example, The Road by Cormac McCarthy, while an excellent recommendation, if you want something like The Last of Us, that's not what's going to happen here. I don't know if that was grammatically correct, but that's okay. The recommendations I'm going to be giving to you today are incredibly specific, and they are going to be recommendations that feel like The Last of Us. So they don't have the same plot, they don't necessarily even include some type of end of the world or dude takes care of girl, accidentally they become family. No, we are going to be talking about love, about grief, about the wasteland, about the wilderness, about certain aspects of The Last of Us that speak to me or that make me happy about the game, about the show, etc, etc. I would look into the trigger warnings for these books because multiple of them have something very deep and dark going on, so you know, stay safe if that's what you need. But we are going to go into it. These are the books I'm going to be recommending to you, and I don't even know which order they're from, so we're just going to go and I'm going to tell you what category they fit. So first up I have After the Flood by Cassandra Montag, which this is going to be for those apocalyptic, searching for my lost family member type of way, like Joel is looking for Tommy in The Last of Us TV show, for example. This is about a woman who has a child with her, but she is on a mission to find her older daughter who was taken from her by the father of said missing daughter, and she needs to manipulate her way into these situations. She needs to essentially cross the freaking world to get to the daughter. The biggest problem is that the end of the world that happened here was kind of the aftermath of climate change. Essentially 90% of the world is flooded. There are small communities that exist wherever dry land is possible, but mostly you have to sail what used to be cities and used to be roads, etc, etc. And you know, apparently, obviously commodities are difficult to come by. There are not that many boats and ships. There are a lot of pirates and people who definitely take advantage of the situation, kind of like certain situations in The Last of Us. So if you're looking for something like that, you know, having to manipulate your situation, having to manipulate yourself into a situation so you can succeed in your goal, which is probably very emotional for you, and you don't necessarily get to the happy ending the way that you want to, or it doesn't look like you want it to, this is for you. Next up, we're going to talk about How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, which is also post-apocalyptic, but this follows a world in which we discover a 30,000-year-old corpse which is carrying a virus which is airborne, so you can imagine what happens afterwards. This book is told in stories, all further and further away from the incident of finding this 30,000-year-old corpse, but you as a reader essentially get to discover all these various human stories, and it is mostly about grief. It is mostly about our human inability to let go, whether it's people or situations or objects. It is very dark. It is very heavy. It is, I mean, it discusses grief in so many forms and ways, so obviously very intense, especially in the first half as you get further and further away from that inciting incident. But I can honestly recommend it so much if you're looking for something that talks about grief and explores grief, like Joel, who is still grieving for Sarah after all these years. This is for you for sure. Okay, next up is another post-apocalyptic book, I guess you could say, and it is Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay. This is for you if you want to read something that feels like the first episode of The Last of Us. So you're following the outbreak as it happens. There's, I think it's a strain of rabies or something like that that kind of escapes and wreaks havoc across this particular community that we are following. And we are especially following a pregnant woman who is desperately trying to get to a vaccine, and her friend who is a doctor, and how they try to navigate this apocalypse and try to have this woman have her baby in a safe way where she's not infected and nobody else is infected and everything goes well. It's very intense. You see exactly the type of behaviors that you see as the outbreak happens in The Last of Us, for example. It is very chaotic, very intense in places. It is very tropey, so if you're looking for something that feels like a zombie horror movie that you've probably seen, this is also definitely for you. I know that this is kind of like 50-50 for readers. You either like it or you dislike it. But on the off chance that you belong with the first category and you like it, I think you should check it out if this is something that kind of intrigued you with The Last of Us and you wanted more from it. Another good tip would be Kevin at the End of the World, if you want something like that, but not what I'm focusing on right now. Next up, which is for, I don't even know why I picked this one, it just spoke to me. It's the 5th season or Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This is essentially about a world in which a cataclysmic event essentially happens every once in a while. You know, right now it's this deadly ash that's falling. And it is, again, I guess it belongs with the After the Fly category for a parent who is trying to navigate the world in which they don't know if they can still identify as a parent. This is about a woman, Esun, who is trying to find her daughter, who again was taken by the father, but for different reasons. This is fantasy. This is not post-apocalyptic, this is strictly sci-fi fantasy. So if you're looking for some magic for villainous characters who might possibly be seen as antagonists, definitely read this. It is riveting. It is very confusing at first. You don't know what the hell is happening, but I promise you that it's worth the ride. And I think it definitely delivers on those shocks and twists and unexpected things that you wouldn't think that the author would go with, like certain deaths in The Last of Us. Definitely go for this. Scenes are harrowing, things that you wouldn't expect to read are read, and it is honestly an excellent time. The second book in the trilogy is my favorite. One of the things that I really appreciated about the adaptation of The Last of Us is that they made Henry's brother Sam deaf and fluent in ASL. So I really wanted to focus on that and recommend you a book that features a deaf character, and that is in this case going to be Into the Drowning Deep. This is about an expedition into the Mariana Trench. They are going there after another expedition disappeared without a trace, and they are trying to figure out what happened, if they can still find their ship, boat, submarine, not sure, and whether there's still somebody who is alive. And it is essentially about this expedition. One of the people who are very important on board of this expedition is deaf, and she does communicate through ASL, even though her words are written out as English sentences, which there is an author's note about at the beginning. But it is one of my favorite books that centers the voice of a hearing impaired person, which I thought was great, and I wanted to give you a horror recommendation if you are here for the horror. That this, aside from involving really cool and scary creatures, can also deliver on that front, so check it out. Next up, we're going to focus on the wilderness aspect of when Joel and Ellie were stranded in the forest, spending the night there, being worried about people. Very specific, but I'm going to recommend Sorrowland by River Solomon. This is about, I think her name is Wren. I could be wrong, but I think her name is Wren. It's been a while since I read this. Vern, almost. So this is about Vern, who decides to leave the community, aka / cult that she was with, and deliver her twins in the middle of the forest and kind of just live in the wilderness with them for a good few years before she decides to re-enter civilization. So if you're looking for this kind of gritty loneliness and weird body horror things happening as she transforms in the wilderness and as she re-enters civilization or society or whatever you want to call it, definitely check this out. I almost forgot about the body horror aspect, but this definitely has some really creepy body horror, like think clickers and stuff like that. I do have a different recommendation for that. But mostly if you want wilderness vibes, people surviving out in nature where they have to just rely on one another and on how they communicate together, huge recommendation for this one. Again, it is dark, so definitely check out the trigger warnings, but it is beautifully written, and I think it truly delivers on that specific thing. The wilderness and the feeling that you get like you are lost, but at the same time it's with purpose, and it is kind of a shelter to you. please read this. Okay, I have two more for you. The next one is going to be a YA or young adult book that is mostly for, let's call it teenage adventure, because, you know, if you've played a game, if you've played Left Behind, if you know anything about Ellie's backstory, you know that she was never one to stick to the rules. She always wanted to make her own way. She always wanted to be herself despite what circumstances she might find herself in. And that is definitely true when they are at Bill and Frank's and she steals Frank's gun. It can be said about how she communicates with Sam, how they play together. You know, she has a reckless side to her, she has a very soft side to her, she is a hard shell, soft core kind of girl, but she would also do anything for her loved ones, and I think that that is true about the main cast of Gear Breakers by Zoe Hanamikura. I will say that I don't remember the plot completely, but it is kind of like if you mix Mad Max and Pacific Rim, kind of, when you mix those two together, you get this. But it also talks about rebellion, about compliance, about unlikely allies having to work together and what it looks like, about a tight-knit group of friends where the group is really fragile because of the society circumstance that they are in. And I think if you're looking for something that feels like the harsher, rougher, but also soft at the center parts of Ellie, you can find it in Gear Breakers without issue. In my opinion. And the last one is going to be the body horror recommendation that I mentioned. So something that completely took my breath away was seeing the bloater and the clicker in the adaptation, because they are so freaking scary in the game. Like the first time you encounter a clicker, you die like 10 times just out of pure terror, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't even have to do with your skill at the game, just because you're so terrified. And seeing them, it was so beautiful. It was like looking at a giallo film almost. It felt like an acid trip. It was amazingly done, disturbing and scary while also absolutely beautiful. And I think the same can be said about Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfeld. This is about two women, wives. One of them comes back from an underwater expedition and something is wrong with her. She doesn't act like herself. She isn't herself. She starts changing. She wants to be in contact with water all the time. She's very strange. Her wife is like, "Who are you? I don't know you." And the body horror that we get to eventually in this book, everything is very creepy. You get flashbacks from when she was under the sea. It is scary, just like the clickers when you see them for the first time. But I am truly recommending it for the descriptions of the body horror in this, because the body horror is like disturbing, kind of gross, but at the same time you're reading this and you cannot believe what you're reading, because at the same time it's kind of beautiful and hard to describe. I feel like I'm not doing it justice, but if you're looking for something ambiguous that kind of feels like a trip, because how can it be so scary but also so profound at the same time, I definitely recommend Our Wives Under the Sea. It is a force of a book and it's so short, honestly. Check it out if you're looking for something like that. I definitely recommend it. It's not the type of body horror that, you know, involves people getting slashed up and body parts are flying, but mostly just body horror that is described in detail and it is happening to a person and it changes their physique in some way, shape or form. I don't want to tell you anything else, but definitely recommend that one. If there's anything else, like a different trope from The Last of Us or anything else that you wanted covered, please leave me a suggestion in the comments. I can do a part 2, or I can just give you a recommendation in the comments. Let me also know if you agree with what I said about these, or if you would recommend something completely different for these themes. What I want to know, what would you recommend for an exploration of grief? That is something that apparently really works for me. So if you know about any book that really explores it, just like The Last of Us, and how The Last of Us explores love, because I feel like I didn't mention, but I think with grief and our inability to let go, it's very closely connected with love, in my opinion, and love I think is like the strongest theme through The Last of Us. So if you have something like that, recommend it to me. I would be indebted to you. If you are new here and you enjoyed this, please subscribe. Or, you know, even if you hated it, out of spite, click subscribe. I dare you. Leave a like if this was something that you enjoyed, and if you don't want to say anything to me in the comments, that's fine as well, but please leave me a mushroom emoji. That would be awesome. I would really appreciate it. But that's all the recommendations I had for you today. I hope you enjoyed your time here. I hope you had fun with this. I kind of did. I didn't think I would have this much fun with it, but I did. So here we are. Thank you for joining me. I'm gonna go edit this and I'm going to go have coffee. That's what I'm gonna do. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Bye.